When you meet the mandrills for the first time, at least in my case, what marks you the most is their physical appearance, which is really astounding. Typically, 6 months ago, he was an adolescent, slim and hardly colored. And in such a short time, you can see he has practically doubled in volume and now has shimmering colors around the nose and around the posterior. Assuming a male is dominant from 10 years old, how long will he manage to remain dominant, given that he has to fight constantly to maintain his hierarchical rank and others are jostling behind? The males manage to keep their dominance for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years for the strongest, but that's all. 4 years is already a lot, because for a male mandrill, it is really exhausting to be dominant.
We're in Franceville in Gabon, the Central African country where veterinary surgeon Delphine Verrier settled in 2008. Fascinated by mandrills, the primates with the colored faces, Delphine discovered the CIRMF, or International Centre for Medical Research in Franceville, which is also home to the Primatology Centre. Here we find the world's biggest colony of mandrills living in semi-liberty. As far back as she can remember, Delphine has always been an animal lover.
I grew up in France, in the east of the country, in the city. So my taste for wildlife, open spaces, and nature grew through TV documentaries such as Jacques Cousteau's programs. As a child, I was especially fascinated by marine mammals, in particular dolphins and whales.
Delphine manages the Primatology Centre. She monitors the primate's health, as well as continuing her research into the mandrill's social behavior and biology.
One fun thing about working with primates is that we can see how quickly they become aware that they're dealing with a man or a woman. There's no doubt about it, as a woman, it's much easier for me to work with the mandrills and great apes than my male colleagues. I'm accepted much more quickly. I never get an aggressive reaction. On the contrary, the animals aren't at all wary of me. Maybe that's why the vast majority of primatologists are women, in fact. What's funny about these monkeys, too, is that they're so used to interacting with individuals that it's also extremely easy for us, as observers, to attract their attention and interact with them by mimicking the expressions that are a sign of appeasement.
The CIRMF mandrill colony was created in 1983 with the introduction of 15 orphan mandrills from females that had been killed by hunters. These mandrills live in a natural enclosure of tropical forest covering nearly 20 acres and have reproduced over the years. Today, the colony boasts over 200 individuals.
In fact, we've just spotted a limping animal, so we're trying to get a little closer to see what might be wrong. It's the former dominant male. He's lost a lot of color. He was a lot redder than that. The competition is fierce. Mandrills, in fact, live in a social structure called a polygyny. That's where a dominant male defends a harem of females. So there's an intense competition between adult males for access to these females. In order to conserve this monopoly of the harem of his females, the male must be capable of chasing off all potential rivals. What that comes down to is the biggest and strongest usually wins. Studies conducted in this colony have shown that there was close correlation between the intensity of the red color on the mandrill's nose and the level of testosterone circulating in the blood. And we know that testosterone is closely linked to dominance. So here, with the loss of his absolute dominance, he becomes discolored, as we can see. And now we are interested because, having observed him earlier, we saw he was limping. We can't see any wound, only a swelling. So we'll keep watching.
In addition to her work at the Primatology Centre, Delphine goes once a month to Le Quetti Park, located some 150 kilometers from Franceville, to study the behavior of mandrills in the wild. She's looking to understand how the SIV virus, a virus equivalent to the HIV virus in man, spreads naturally through the mandrill population without actually making them sick. After a 3-hour drive, Delphine finally arrives at Le Quetti Park.
Hi, Ibolo.
Hello, Delphine.
Are you well?
Yes, fine.
Healthy?
Yes, great.
And your family?
Very well.
So it's all good? And the mandrills?
In the Modelin.
In Module 1?
Yep.
Right, let's go.
Le Quetti Park is a protected natural environment that covers more than 140 square kilometers. In its forests and savanna, we find several representatives of the local wildlife, as well as a colony of mandrills, around 60 of which were reintroduced into the wild. Delphine and Ibolo head for the zone where the keepers spotted the mandrills this morning.
We've just entered Le Quetti Park. We will visit the site where we will make the first triangulation point to try to locate the signal from the mandrill's radio collars. We need 3 points, in fact, that enable us to isolate the central point where the animals are.
The mandrills live mainly in the forest, where they feed mostly on fruit and seeds. To find their food, they must travel great distances daily, which makes them extremely difficult to observe. In order to be able to locate the group more easily, 3 of the females have been fitted with radio collars.
Of the 3 collars, there's only one which transmits a good signal. That means it's high time we change the batteries on the 2 other collars.
For Delphine, the absence of a signal greatly reduces their chances of finding the group of mandrills, which could ruin their research.
Now turn to fix the 3rd point on the other side. We have to follow them every day, otherwise if we leave them for 2 or 3 days, they're capable of moving such a distance in a day that in 3 or 4 days we'd lose them and it would take weeks to locate them again.
Some mandrills in Le Quetti Park come from the Primatology Centre. The 2nd largest virology research center in Africa, it is home to a dozen species of primates. As well as mandrills and gorillas, we find the only colony in the world of sun-tailed monkeys living in semi-liberty. For some years now, Peggy Motch has been studying this species that is native to Gabon, only discovered in 1984. She is passionate about this small, little-known primate.
We carry out observation every day. We only interact with them during the health checks. Otherwise, there's no contact with them. All we do is observe, see how they live in their milieu, how they use the space. The male there, a dominant, has a very, very yellow tail. and testicles that are very, very blue. With dominant sexual maturity and testosterone, no doubt his colours become more pronounced. They're animals that are very difficult to observe, so we have to find out everything. That's the original aspect of this species. We know nothing. In the Primatology Centre, there are two main themes. There's public health on the one hand, which would include, for example, viruses which circulate in colonies of wild primates, or in colonies of primates we have here, natural viruses, which don't make them sick, understanding how they can circulate. And the second aspect that is specific to the Primatology Centre is conservation. We're seeking to better understand the kinds of threat that can hang over these primates in their natural milieu. Understanding the threat at the level of a virus or parasite, etc., is having the keys to better protect them in their natural milieu. So we work a lot on these themes of zoonoses in general, zoonoses being diseases that can be transmitted from man to animal and from animal to man. You want a peanut too? So it was worth the trip.
For several years, we let things happen. We let the animals breed haphazardly. And then the problem of overpopulation arose. Because we have a surface area of nearly 20 acres, and at some point we have to regulate the numbers so we don't get overpopulation and the degradation of the environment and the incidence of diseases. So there was a first stage in 2002 and then again in 2006 when the CIRMF transferred mandrills to Likidi Park in Bakumba.
The relevance for the Primatology Centre was simple. It was the first ever attempted release of mandrills. And for us it was interesting at a scientific level to understand how these animals would get used to their new conditions on a behavioural level. And as they were meeting wild mandrills, how the new viruses, the new pathogens they would encounter would be transmitted between them.
As they are moving to another area of the park, Delphine and Ibolo finally find the forest where the mandrills are hiding.
There's an adolescent on the road. He might sound the alarm. Usually, adolescent males are the sentinels. He's seen us now.
To draw them out into the open, they decide to proceed with the distribution of bush fruits and cakes. The mandrills form groups of variable size called hordes, usually composed of around 100 individuals. However, hordes of over 1,000 individuals have been observed in Lopane National Park.
Around 95%, 96% of groups are made up of females and their descendants. They form a stable group throughout the year, even throughout their lives, and only in the mating season, between June and October, do a lot of mature male adults join the group to reproduce with the females. That's a general rule when you work with wild animals. You must avoid making any sudden moves or scaring them. Usually, it's when animals feel scared, feel threatened or cornered in some way that they have aggressive reactions. So the best way is to be forgotten.
In the mating season, relations can sometimes get tense. Delphine carefully observes the behavior of the dominant male. She tries to calm him with a grimace, but he doesn't react.
I do sometimes worry, particularly in one specific period, when she was pregnant, because she didn't stop work right away.
We'll back away now.
Delphine is someone who's optimistic by nature, and she's very strict about what she does. But it's also true that accidents can happen even to the most rigorous of people, and that's why you're always a little worried.
The problem is, I'm a bit scared of the dominant male. He's nice enough for now, but I find him very insistent and he approaches us a lot. I'm not very keen on that. The male isn't aggressive, but he's pretty insistent.
Delphine thinks this place isn't suitable for the food distribution. There's too little space on the road, which creates risks for everyone. The young woman therefore decides to go a little further into the savannah to distribute the tidbits.
Look, that's just what I don't want. He's getting closer to you. He's more and more insistent. Are you going to stay here?
I'll walk up.
You get into the car. No, stay over there, Ibolo, because he'll follow you. I don't want the male to approach them. Ibolo, they're following us.
Go ahead.
No, get in, because you have to be there with the cake before they arrive.
The colony of mandrills at the Franceville Primatology Centre is unique in the world because of its size and the systematic monitoring carried out on individuals for close to 30 years. Each animal is identified from birth. It is given a number that it keeps throughout its entire life. Each year, samples are taken to evaluate the virological status of the animals. It is to showcase all this data that the team has decided to conduct this research project on viruses and to compare this control group with the Lekedi Park colony.
Take the whole bag. The male's coming. Stand over there, Ibolo. You have to be in front. The only thing that really interests them is the distribution of tidbits. Because we do it very rarely, and it really is a pleasure for them. So there you have the female U2B, who comes from CIRMF colony, which was released in 2006, and who is fitted with a VHF transmitter collar, which enables us to spot the group, and who has a young baby under her belly. All the babies under the bellies are this year's babies, in fact. Here on my right, you have a young female whose sexual swelling has begun. And then you have a young adolescent male who is interested in her swelling. You can see him sniffing, and straight away what happens? The dominant male arrives.
When the CIRMF mandrills were released in Lekedi Park, none of them was carrying the SIV virus. Since then, wild mandrills have joined the horde. It's now estimated that 80% of mandrills in this horde are carrying the virus.
The SIV and STLV viruses don't seem to really cause any illness. The SIV mandrills are no different from the others. They don't look sick. That's the difference with HIV in humans, as a human who contracts HIV will become ill and develop AIDS, and that's not the case with mandrills. You'll have to stand back as there's a big male coming. However, what we don't know, although there are no acute symptoms of disease, is that perhaps the virus does have a cost, and perhaps the individual will be less capable of reproduction, or have fewer offspring, and perhaps not live as long. So we want to study all this. These are the questions that we are hoping to answer through our projects on the mandrills.
We're primates. We're classified as primates. The closer two species are, the more the virus has a chance of passing from one species to the other, as the other organism bears a great resemblance. In the case of primates, human primates and non-human primates are very close. Man shares 99% of his genetic makeup with chimpanzees, so viruses are easily transmitted. That's the case with HIV.
Though parasites are spread through droppings, the SIV-STLV virus would seem to be transmitted by blood. At what point do we come into contact with monkey blood? When we hunt. It's enough to have cuts or even invisible microcuts on the fingers for the virus to penetrate.
In Gabon, primate hunting is still legal. Only gorillas, chimpanzees, and sun-tailed monkeys are, in principle, protected by law. Although the mandrill is on the red list of threatened species, it is fairly common to find its meat for sale in public markets or on the roadside.
This problem of hunting and the consumption of meat from mandrills and monkeys in general can only be resolved by proposing alternative activities for the families of hunters. We do this through environmental education and making people aware of the risk of hunting these animals, and also of the risk to these already threatened animal populations.
When I was younger, there were enough animals, but intensive hunting has resulted in our forests becoming poorer and poorer today. Because if we'd considered conservation 10 years earlier, we could have had lots more animals in our forests.
With food distribution over, the mandrills return to seek refuge in the forest.
As the light dies very quickly here, they're already looking for a site for the night. For the group to remain cohesive, there's a lot of this type of vocalization, so the monkeys lagging behind can follow the main body of the troop and come together.
For Delphine Verrier, there was a double interest in releasing the mandrills in Lekedi Park. As well as putting the primates in a protected environment, a hunter-free zone, this initiative has given the communities the prospect of new revenue streams by developing environmental awareness activities.
I think it's over for tonight. They're falling asleep. Shall we go? People are very receptive when you explain the importance of preserving these species, of showcasing the extraordinary heritage of this wonderful country, Gabon. They understand why and see the need for these actions.